Recording in progress.
안내 멘트 할게요. May I have your attention, please, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. Welcome to the 5th International Conference on Learning Cities. The session will begin from 6 p.m. in Korean time. All participants should enter the conference hall and please be seated. Those who are participating online, please be ready for the forum. In addition, simultaneous interpretation for Korean, English, and French will be provided. Please use the receiver if needed. Channel 1 for Korean, 2 for English, 3 for French. Online participants, please choose preferred language in the platform. For the smooth progress of the conference, we would appreciate for participants to turn off your cell phones or turn your cell phones into vibration mode. To prevent further spread of COVID-19, please make sure to wear masks at all times. Also, we require all speakers to wear masks at all times, even while delivering speeches due to the disinfection guidelines. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, welcome to the 5th International Conference on Learning Cities. I'm Grace Hyunjung-won, your MC for today's event. Now we are moving on to the Day 3 parallel session under the theme of promoting learning for health in the field of sexuality. If you have any questions you can ask the questions during the Q&A session. And for the online participants, you can leave your questions on the chat rooms. Now I'll pass the microphone to Mr. Chris Kessel, the moderator of today's session. Mr. Chris, are you connected? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, very good. The floor is yours now.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everyone for this session in the Parallel Thematic Forum, Promoting Learning for Health in the Field of Sexuality. I'm Chris Castle. I'm the Chief of the Section for Health and Education at UNESCO headquarters in Paris. And it's my great pleasure to be able to be moderating this session today with an exciting group of panelists who I will introduce just now. I would like to check, I see two of the panelists' videos on, but I'm not seeing, there's two additional panelists. I'd just like to confirm that they're on. I understand that Denise Morrow and Emma Murphy are joining. Are they here, and can they turn their video on so we can see that, please? Okay, I'm still not seeing them appear, but while we're waiting for them to join, and we're also waiting for another panelist who's joining us, which is Ms. Marta Suplicy, who is joining from Sao Paulo, Brazil. So hopefully we'll see their videos and they will be joining us in just a moment. But let me perhaps begin by introducing the panels and providing a short overview of the session. And then, yes, I think I see a video now. Is that Denise and Emma? Great, they're raising their hands. Welcome to the session. Delighted to have you join us. We're just missing one other panelist who hopefully will also appear shortly. Let me start just by providing an overview of the session, and then I'll quickly introduce the panelists and we'll get started. So today we're going to be focusing on comprehensive sexuality education, or CSE as we often refer to it. We all know it's called many different things in different countries. Comprehensive sexuality education is the global term that's used to describe broadly, as I said, what many countries call different things, but it essentially is a curriculum-based process of teaching and learning about the cognitive, emotional, physical, and social aspects of sexuality. And in today's forum, we're going to be discussing the importance of equipping young people with knowledge and skills to make responsible choices for their lives, and the ways in which learning cities can provide CSE to support people's empowerment by improving their analytical, communication, and other life skills for health and well-being. I think all of us know, particularly in the context of COVID-19, how very important sexual and reproductive health and rights are and have been. And so that's going to be a backdrop, I think, for today's discussion, and we'll hear that from the different panelists. So in terms of who we have with us today, let me just briefly mention who they are, and then they can also maybe say a little bit more about themselves in a self-introduction when I call on them. So first up, we have Denise McMorrow and Emma Murphy, and they are from the Dublin Learning City team who'll be joining us today. Next, we have Ms. Asher Craig, who is joining us from Bristol, and she's a councillor and deputy mayor of Bristol for Children's Services, Education and Equalities. She'll be followed by Mr. Xavier Hospital, who's my UNESCO colleague and our regional health and education advisor in the West and Central Africa region based in Dakar, Senegal. And then we have Ms. Marta Suplicy. I know we have a video from her, and I don't know whether yet she'll be joining us online to participate as well. I hope so. So that's the exciting lineup that we have here today. What we'll be doing is inviting each of the panelists to join to say a very, very short, brief additional self-introduction, and then make an 8 to 10 minute presentation. And then that'll be followed by an interactive discussion with some guiding questions. So it's my great pleasure now to turn over to Denise and Emma to make the first presentation. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Emma, who's going to introduce the slides and talk through the first half of the presentation. Emer, I should say. Emer Murphy. Thank you, Emer.
Thank you very much, Denise. It's my absolute pleasure to be here, and we're delighted to be asked, so thank you. And thanks for everyone in attendance. It's great to see everyone here today. So, can we have the first slide, please? So, comprehensive sexuality education is a process of teaching and learning about the physical, the social, the cognitive, and the emotional aspects of sexuality. Its importance is to enable one to make decisions about their sexuality and about their relationships, and to shed light on issues such as gender-based violence and sexual exploitation. As we can see from the slide above, there are 8 key aspects or topics of CSE, which have been agreed upon by the UN. These topics have the greatest impact when they are delivered alongside each other in both formal education and informal settings, such as arts and sport, and also consistently throughout one's life, not just in one-off sessions or interventions. Although CSE topics have been agreed upon by UN member states, it is important when situating CSE in different contexts, so be it countries or within groups within society, that there is considerations to make. So firstly, regional commitments to CSE refers to political will within an area and also policies and national laws. Adaptability of CSE content refers to programming it culturally to fit the group that you're delivering it to or the country that you're delivering it within. Education refers to ensuring that the program is age appropriate. So a program will look very different being delivered to children, to adolescents, and also to adults. And working with communities and parents. So this is a very important point as it refers to intergenerational learning. So working with children within a community, but also their parents, in some instance, community leaders, etc. And this really has the power to shape norms and values. Our first case study of today is taken from Nigeria. So an NGO in Nigeria called Education as a Vaccine set up an application, or as many of us know it as an app, that maps out sexual and reproductive services available in that area. It also has a direct helpline for users to text if they have any issues or questions. Of course, it's also anonymous, which really suits the culture as it's not an openly spoken about subject or not particularly delivered through the formal education system. As we can see from the slide, each just shows how relevant and useful the service is. Our second case study is taken from Bangladesh. So one government party and a group of researchers undertook a study in an area to see issues surrounding CSE. Their findings enabled them to create a program which was then integrated into schools, which dealt with issues such as sexual harassment, exploitation. The program that they made was created for students, but also for teachers and parents within the community. Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to my colleague, Denise.
Thank you very much, Emer. I want each of you on the call and here present today to consider, do you have a problem with consent in your locality, in your country, wherever you're from? Think deep about it. We also want you to think about your own experience of sexual education in school, whether that was primary school, secondary school, or third level. Do you think that experience was satisfactory? Do you think you learned what you needed to know about consent? How comfortable are you talking about sexual consent? Is it something that maybe you are very comfortable with, or are you embarrassed about it? We have a lot of questions there. We do have prizes at the end of this short presentation, and I will ask you at the end if you remember one or two things about what we were going to tell you. The first thing about consent is that it must be ongoing, it must be mutual, and it must be freely given. When we think about consent, the implications of non-consensual sex can be life-destroying. It can come at criminal offences. So that is why we need to have open conversations about consent and what consent really means to us. We have a problem in Ireland. I'll put my hand up and say yes, but we are happy to address that problem. We realise that the statistics in relation to non-consensual sex were very frightening. We want you to think about what that statistic might be. I can tell you what that statistic is. We have reports that 1 in 3 students, Irish students, have reported non-consensual sex or sexual offences. That is quite a staggering figure to think about, 1 in 3 people. That means that each of us here in the room or online must surely know somebody who has been affected by this. Some people are not even able to talk about it. Others may come and talk about it. So as a result of that, we, alongside our government minister, Minister Simon Harris, has really put together an excellent programme. The programme is about information giving. It's about having open conversations. It's about realising the importance of no means no. It's about knowing that consent has to be ongoing, it has to be mutual, and it has to be freely given. So what have we done? So we have put together a framework, a consent framework that is being rolled out over 22 higher education institutes. Alongside that, we are now mandated to have a consent action plan within each of our higher education institutes. But all of that could be just a paper or policy exercise if we don't get the buy-in from the people who really matter. Who are those people? Those people are students. Those people are academics. Those people are counsellors. Those people are peers within our community. Those people are the Garda representatives. They are a whole community of individuals that need to realise that we need to have more open conversations about sex education, about consent, and what that really means for people. I might ask you to play a short video and to go through an excellent resource. I said we have some prizes, but one of the greatest gifts that we can give you is our resources. And we in Dublin Learning City are very encouraged to promote an excellent resource that has been developed on consent. It's freely available, it's online, and I'm going to ask our great colleagues down at the back of the room to maybe open up the link that is at the bottom of that page, the consent page, and we will show you and demonstrate that excellent resource to you, if you don't mind, please. Thank you. We can't currently see it on the screen, if you don't mind. But in between times, I might have a prize for somebody in the audience. I mentioned an acronym, and it's OMFG. Does anyone remember, OMGF, sorry. Does anyone remember what that means when I mentioned consent? It must be ongoing, mutual. Excellent. We have a first prize. Emer, would you hand that down to Michael, please? Thank you. And if you ever go to Dublin, we have included a map of Dublin poetry and song. Thank you. We hope you do come. Okay, so we'll play just this video, a short video on active consent, and we'll demonstrate the excellent tool that we have. We do hope that you will tap into this excellent tool, the toolkit that we're providing you with, and that you will share that resource. This programme is being rolled out to 16 to 24-year-olds in 22 higher education institutes. Thank you. Would you mind just clicking on the play button, please?
Everyone knows you need consent for all sexual activity.
But what is active consent?
Active consent is OMFG.
Active consent is ongoing.
That felt amazing. Want to keep going?
Maybe some other time. I was really into it too, though.
And you can change your mind at any time. Saying no or changing your mind doesn't mean that you're rejecting the person, just the act.
Active consent is mutual.
2 nights later.
Mind blown. Should we go again? Yes.
You're both really into it and let each other know. Say it, show it, scream it if you're brave enough.
Yes.
I love it when you do that.
Keep going.
Active consent is freely given.
You don't feel like I'm pressuring you?
Absolutely not. Can't you tell how into it I am?
Everyone is actively engaging because they want to and are not being pressured or unable to give their consent due to the excessive intoxication by drugs or alcohol.
Active consent is OMFG. But what barriers get in the way of active consent between partners?
Gender stereotypes?
Self-consciousness?
Inexperience.
Not knowing them that well?
Rape myths?
Misunderstanding.
Different and/or excessive levels of intoxication.
Oh, you'll think I'm frigid.
I think they like what I'm doing, but I'm not sure.
She put her hand down my pants. She was clearly up for it.
On the same page? Are you sure about that? Check yourself and check in with your partners. Throughout.
Verbally? You okay?
And non-verbally.
So let's begin.
I don't want you to be shocked in any way by that video, because what we want to do is we want to ensure that we get the message clear about consent, that no actually means no, and that people can have very healthy sexual relations once the conversation is opened up. Let's be honest, we have a problem if we have 1 in 3 people that are reporting unwarranted sexual activity cases. It's too high. So we have to solve it. We have a willingness to solve it. We have an openness, and we have to get the conversations going. We're very much looking forward to sharing all our resources. That was one just clip of a video, but just to remind you that it's a much more in-depth toolkit that we have on offer. It has come about as a result of intensive research between 2 key colleges, that's NUI Galway and UCC. We are part of a network of many representatives on a national steering group to end sexual violence and harassment in third level education. It's not a pretty subject, but it's one that we do need to talk about. And we can have a very, very positive ending once we come to terms with having the conversation. We know that there are cultural differences between countries, people, places, and we also know that there are behavioural issues. But it's okay to have the conversation, and it's important to start the conversation early. Can I just say that we would love to become leaders in relation to ending sexual violence and harassment, and we can all do it. Everybody in the room and everybody online, we all have a role to play. We just have 1 or 2 other questions. Can anyone remember the statistic in relation?
Denise, sorry, I think we're running a little bit behind time, so can maybe we hold those questions as part of the discussion later in the session,
Lovely.
please?
We'll have that. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for that very important presentation about consent in particular, which I think is a really important aspect of comprehensive sexuality education, and also to Emmer for the wonderful case studies from Nigeria and Bangladesh. I should say that the Republic of Ireland is a donor and a partner with UNESCO for our work to support countries in sub-Saharan Africa so that they can deliver good quality comprehensive sexuality education. So we're very grateful for your presentation about what's happening in Ireland itself, and also for the Irish government's contribution to our program that UNESCO supports called Our Rights, Our Lives, Our Future. Thank you very much for that. Let's move on now in the interest of time to our next presenter, which is Councillor and Deputy Mayor Asher Craig. Asher, over to you, please.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to make a presentation to you this morning about the work that we are doing in the great city of Bristol. Just to give you a little bit of background to myself, I have been a local councillor in the city of Bristol for the last 5 years. And up until 2 weeks ago, I was the cabinet member with responsibility for communities, public health and equalities. And in the last 2 weeks, I have now taken on the responsibility for children, families, education skills, and equalities. But I do have a background in children and families, so lots of challenges. But I'm here today to talk to you about the work that we've been doing in our city around sexual health. Bristol became a learning city in 2015, and we gained our UNESCO Learning City status in 2016. In 2017, Bristol Learning City was awarded the UNESCO Learning City Award in Cork at the UNESCO Learning City Conference. Next slide, please. So I'd like to just really introduce to you a little bit about the city of Bristol. We are one of 10, what are known as 10 core cities, the largest of the 10 cities in the United Kingdom. We are a city with a rich but often very difficult history. As you can see, we have a population of just over 465,000 people. We are extremely diverse when it comes to culture, religion, ethnicity, and language. As you can see, we speak over 91 languages, over 187 countries of birth are represented in our city, and over 45 religions and none are practiced. We're a very innovative and creative city, and we're also a very young and educated population. I think currently outside of London, Bristol is the most highly educated city that we have in the UK. Next slide, please. For us, diversity has many benefits, but it can be a challenge in the context of offering a universal sexual health education. In some of our cultures and for some religions, there is still a stigma attached to sexual health. So for example, HIV and AIDS. In Bristol, the prevalence is higher than the national average. Late diagnosis has an impact on late expectancy, more common in Bristol. And stigma continues to remain an issue in some Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities and in some healthcare settings. In terms of same-sex relationships, some cultures and religions are not comfortable with positive representation of same-sex relationships in school education. And nationally, we saw this was a major issue in Birmingham, one of our neighbouring cities. And then I'm going to touch on period poverty, some of the outdated views of periods and menstruation, still seen as unclean and dirty in some communities. We're seeing girls missing education and school during periods, and unable to buy sanitary products. Next slide, please. In September 2020, the UK government made changes to the curriculum in England regarding the teaching of sexual education. In primary, sex education is not compulsory at primary schools. Sex education the program is tailored to the age and the physical and emotional maturity of students. Schools must consult with parents about the policy and content in this area, and parents do have a right to withdraw their child from sex education at primary school. Statutory guidance for relationships education is, however, compulsory. In terms of secondary education, sexual education is compulsory in secondary school, and by the end of secondary education, all young people in England must have learned and understood the following: respectful relationships, including friendships, intimate and sexual relationships, including sexual health, changing adolescent body, families and people who care for me, online and media, being safe, and of course the law. And working with parents and communities is essential in us doing this. Next slide, please. So what are we doing in Bristol? For us, it is all about partnership and collaboration. In the area of HIV and AIDS, Bristol is a fast track initiative. It is a United Nations initiative to try and end the AIDS pandemic by 2030. And Bristol is a proud signatory and a proud fast track city. And we are working incredibly hard to reach that goal. Our own public health assessment found issues with leadership, stigma, and low rates of testing. To address stigma in schools, the Bristol Religious Sexual Health and Education Hub, which is a partnership of Cabot Learning Federation, our Bristol Primary Teaching Alliance, and also the Council, worked with the Terence Higgins Trust, which is a sexual health organisation, to deliver interactive sessions for schools entitled HIV Awareness and Sexually Transmitted Infections. Next slide, please. In terms of communities and the work that we were doing, there were a number of tensions that we had to address, and this was pre-COVID days. There were lots of tensions with religious families who wanted to avoid, which we wanted to avoid in our city. We saw clashes in the city of Birmingham, and we wanted to make sure that in our city that we were representing same-sex relationships in a positive way. So in Bristol, we made the decision to be proactive and counter some of the misinformation around same-sex relationships. The council brought together a range of partner agencies, and we set up an inclusive religion, sexual health and education meeting. That meeting consisted of key statutory partners, LGBTQ organisations, community organisations, and different faith communities. That meeting enabled us to share concerns and inform accurate local communication to counter some of the national misinformed narratives and to ensure that we had a coordinated and supportive response, working together to establish a positive way forward based on sharing information and resources. We also partnered with an organisation called We Rise to run an interactive session with schools, a 90-minute webinar suitable for senior leadership teams, RSC and PSHE leads, and family liaison officer roles within schools. Next slide, please. I'm really proud of the work that we've done around period poverty. We have seen low attendance is a major issue in schools in Bristol. And nationally, there is evidence that many girls miss education because of their periods. Bristol pledged to take a leading role in making period products available to all who need them, whilst also combating outdated attitudes to periods. Period-friendly City was set up by my predecessor, Councillor Helen Godwin, to address some of the issues girls and women face each month. Some of this stigma is due to the cost of sanitary products. Campaign and education materials were developed for schools. We worked with the Brook Clinic that ran Let's Talk sessions. We developed a period-friendly schools guidance, and we also set up drop boxes where girls and women could pick up free sanitary products across the city. Our vision, the period-friendly places vision, is for Bristol to be a city of period dignity in which nobody is held back in life or stigmatized against simply for having a period. And this is part of our journey to being a period-friendly city. We have also developed a web app and established a period-friendly places charity. And this app provides details of all the sites across the city that have free sanitary products. As I said before, we are at the beginning of this journey, and I'm really grateful for all of our city partners and schools that have participated so far in this great initiative. And so finally, in summing up, next slide, please. Stigma around sexual health and body image remains an issue in Bristol, but through partnership and collaboration, we will break down these barriers and ensure every citizen in Bristol has the opportunity to learn about themselves in a way that is safe, inclusive, and honest. The recent murders of Sarah Everard and Sabina Nessa, two women who were murdered in the UK on their way home, has put women's safety in the spotlight. Sexual and gender-based violence has no place in our city or our society. Education of our children and citizens is the best way to ensure that we create a safe and inclusive city now and for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asher. What a wonderful presentation, and also terrific to see examples, well, all the examples that you shared about the proaction that you've described in Bristol that the city's been taking. It's really wonderful to hear about the specific efforts to make Bristol, how did you call it, period-friendly Bristol? I think that's fantastic. I think the issue of menstrual health and dignity, as you mentioned, is really important. It's a critical aspect of comprehensive sexuality education in so many countries around the world. It's really wonderful to hear the examples that you shared. The inclusive approach around same-sex relationships and the LGBTQI community. Really lovely to hear that, and the proaction that you described, working with parents and the community to try and address some of the tensions as you described them. I think it's really quite inspirational to hear that. So congratulations and thank you very much for that. I'm sure there'll be lots of interesting discussions and questions that we'll hopefully have a bit of time for at the end of the session. Now I'd like to move on and invite my colleague Xavier Hospital at the UNESCO Regional Bureau in Dakar to come in with his presentation, please. Xavier, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris. As you said, I'm based in Dakar, covering Western Central Africa and supporting governments to develop programs to face HIV, early and unintended pregnancies, gender-based violence, including in school settings, mainly working with ministries of education. This presentation, though, is about an application that we have developed because we are fully aware that not all adolescents and young people can be reached through formal education programs. And we will show how this application can help adolescents and young people to access to services in cities. So linking comprehensive sexuality education to services through the digital space. Next slide, please. We have been given a brief description of comprehensive sexuality education. What we can say about it is that based on the evidence, we know that comprehensive sexuality education contributes to increase the age of the first intercourse, to reduce the number of partners and the frequency of sexual intercourse, to increase low-risk practices, such as using condoms or contraception. And we know also that talking about sexuality does not increase sexual activity, quite the contrary. We have evidence showing that abstinence-only programs are not effective. And very importantly for us here is there are a number of conditions to make programs effective and to actually decrease adolescent pregnancy, gender-based violence, or the risk of exposure to HIV. For instance, programs must be gender-focused. It's very important to develop gender equality attitudes towards, positive attitudes towards gender equality, and to develop self-confidence. Programs must be implemented with the involvement of parents. And very importantly for us here, programs must be complemented by youth-friendly services. Such services are necessary complements to CSE programs. The availability of services should entail access, for instance, to contraceptive methods, including condom and emergency contraception. It should help access to pregnancy and HIV testing services, to HIV treatment and care, also to support in response to sexual abuse or exposure to HIV through post-exposure prophylaxis, for instance. Next slide. So in order to deliver CSE to adolescents and young people wherever they are, regardless of their vulnerabilities or the risk of exposure to HIV, to early and unintended pregnancies, or to gender-based violence, we have developed with a number of partners an application which delivers content on CSE. It includes games. It allows adolescents and young people to chat through fora, which are confidential and secured. It includes an emergency button in case, for instance, of misfunction of a condom, or an adolescent has been sent to the streets because of he or she has revealed a sexual orientation which is not approved by the parents. And it also includes mapping of services in a number of cities. And this is what we are going to focus on in this presentation. Slide, please. So there are a number of obstacles when it comes to reaching services for adolescents and young people. Adolescents and young people might not know where to go. Where are the youth-friendly services? Are they going to be attended by a person who will judge or who will help? Are the services sufficiently confidential? Do they cover the person's specific needs? So in order to answer to all those questions, Hello Ado application, next slide please. Click please, click and click. The Hello Ado application has listed the services that can be found around the person, and the person can very easily find those services through the application. Next slide, please. So how does it work? So suppose you want to find a service, click please. You just click on an icon at the bottom of the application. Next slide. Suppose you would like to have a service to support your reproductive health. Click please. Next slide. And you need a pregnancy test. Click, please. So it takes you to a list of cities. You can use either the location of your mobile phone to find directly the services around you, or click, please. So you can write the name of your localization in the application. And it automatically gives you the list of structures that will provide you with the pregnancy test. And it will also indicate if it's free. Thank you. So if you click on the next slide, on the pin, the application will give you a map of the city where the place where you can find the structure. Next slide, please. Once you've been given the service, you can provide a feedback which will be used by other users. This feedback will be able to indicate, will enable users to indicate whether the service is youth-friendly, whether it was fast, whether it was free, and whether it was of good quality. Next slide, please. And also there is a possibility to download the list of services around you for in a given location, in case you don't have access to data or to the internet at a given time, which is often the case in Western Central Africa, which is the region for which the application has been developed. Next slide, please. So what has been the work behind this in order to make such a service available? A mapping has been done by surveyors who went through the cities, neighborhood by neighborhood, once they had a complete list of services. And each time they went to a service physically, their questionnaire, which is collected through a mobile phone, automatically collects the the coordinates of the service. And also there is a streamlined questionnaires which helps collecting all the necessary information. The data go directly into a database where they are validated, and then they're transferred to another database that users can access directly through the app, either online or offline once it's been downloaded on the phone. The services that are covered are health services in response to sexuality transmitted infections, including HIV, services for reproductive health, but also services for protection in case of gender-based violence or any other type of violence, and also legal support in case adolescents and young people need them. The countries covered are Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cameroon, DRC, Côte d'Ivoire, Gabon, and Mali and Senegal so far, but we really look forward to map other services. Next slide. And finally, well, there is a lot of reasons why we should collaborate with cities in the development of such a mapping service. There is definitely a shared interest to use such data, the data that we have been collecting for multiple applications. For the service of the city, civil society can use the data, other partners in development work can use the data, the private sector can use the data. Once it's been collected, it's very easy to make it available to different partners. There is a possibility to share the data through different channels, such as other applications through the internet, through associations, through city services. Collecting such data requires really quite a lot of work, and it has a high cost. And we have noted that through our work that different partners often do the same type of mapping, and there is a lot of duplication between partners, and this implies a huge loss of efficiency and much needed funds. And there is a need for frequent updates of the data for it to remain relevant. So we are really looking forward to go on working with cities in collecting such data and to make it available to adolescents and young people. Next slide, please. So this application has been developed with a number of partners. all of which were critically important for the quality of the application. Also with the support of Sweden, Norway, and France, which I definitely should mention here. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you so much for your attention. This is what I wanted to share about mapping services cities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Xavier. Wonderful to have that presentation and to see your reminder of how important it is to connect comprehensive sexuality education for adolescents and young people to sexual and reproductive health services, and then your example of how that's being done in a number of West African countries and cities in particular. I think we heard from the first two presentations also how important it is to connect citizens in these cities with resources and services. So Asher, for example, mentioned the Dropbox, where girls and women could access sanitary commodities and products, for example, and that's a good example of connecting people with services or commodities. And we also heard from Denise the ways in which it's important to make resources available, information, education, toolkits, and other things available to teachers, to parents, to communities, and young people as well. So making those connections, I think, are really important, and it's great, Xavier, to hear your presentation of one particular way that that's being done through an application called Allo Ado. And I think Emma also shared briefly on a slide an app from Nigeria that's also trying to do the same thing. So very interesting to sort of make that case and remind us all that education is really critically important, but on its own, it's not enough. We do have to connect citizens to services, and those services have to be available, they have to be affordable or free. And in particular, when it comes to sexuality, sexual and reproductive health issues, they need to be youth friendly. And Xavier, you reminded us as well that sometimes if they're not, if there's judgmental behaviors by service providers, etc., that can also be an important and significant barrier that we have to address. Let's move on to our final presentation before the discussion. This is a video from Marta Suplicy, who's the head of international affairs at the city of Sao Paulo in Brazil. So let's watch her video now, please.
Dear friends, I would like to greet the UNESCO Global Network Learning Cities, the city of Yeongsu and the government of South Korea, and all authorities, cities and partnerships that are participating on the 5th International Conference on Learning Cities. It's a pleasure to share with you a message based on my own knowledge and experience on sex education and the actions of São Paulo on this field. I have several books published about this matter, and I have been talking about learning and sexuality for the last decades in Brazil. During the Paulo Freire mandate as the education secretary in the early 90s, I was the person in charge for sex education in São Paulo schools. We established a program where teachers were trained. At each hour of class with each students, the teachers had 2 hours of supervision and discussion. It was a relevant and very innovative experience that resulted in the decreasing of girls' pregnancy at the time. According to the Brazilian Society of Pediatrics, broad access to education and information associated with the availability of qualified health services are important and vital tools that cities and local governments must work with. I have no doubt that knowledge and open discussions, very important, the main elements of a comprehensive sex education for all people. Schools need to be open and start talking more to students in the classrooms about this topic. Discussions about sexuality in schools should not be a taboo. There is another important aspect about sexual initiation, group and social acceptance. Teenagers are more likely to fall into social pressure. That's why it's so important to open up classroom discussions, allowing them to express feelings and have chance to learn when and how to say no, regardless of the pressure, or yes, with responsibility. If students don't have an open door for their questions, they will find answers anywhere by themselves without the important help of the state's role in building this knowledge and possibility of change, of choosing. The state's action on this subject has been late, and there is often a lack of action by the state to deal with this important issue, which is not just a health issue, but also a social issue. Sexuality education must be part of the school syllabus as any other subject, such as math, geography, or science, perhaps more important. Teachers must be able to exercise the role of facilitator of the discussion among students, should be well trained, even though it must be let each student take their own position in reality to sexuality, as it will involve several other factors, such as values of the family, education, religion, other things that must be discussed. That has to be a free atmosphere for that to happen. Teachers should act as guides, and they do not have to say what's right or wrong, acting as a catalyst for discussion, a great listener, a person who shows respect for what the student thinks, his doubts, his worries, and who enables the student to think about critics and to go into himself. The moment the mentor teacher says, this is better than that, he leaves his role as an advisor. Here in São Paulo, the municipality has a normative ruling to establish procedures to communicate to the Guardianship Council, the Childhood and Youth Court, cases of suspected or confirmed violence against babies, children, and adolescents enrolled in municipal education system, which demonstrate the engagement of the city with the citizens. The city of São Paulo has a support network for girls and women victims of domestic or sexual violence. This network works with our public health system, giving them medical and psychological support. We understand that no one must be left behind in São Paulo, and we are committed to managing this as a public policy in favor of overcoming the barriers of egalitarian sexual education, gender inequality, and cultural stigma. Dear friends, in this way, the importance of the international collaboration between cities network and international organization is one of the keys to moving forward and build a better city and society for all. Unfortunately, Brazil, as other countries now, have been under a civilizatory retrocess on costumes that has created difficulties for many cities to increase students to have better access to sex education. But things change, and we are going to improve and do better. Thank you.
Wow, what a wonderful video presentation. I'm sorry that Marta's actually not physically with us or online with us to sort of participate in the discussion, because she made some very important and powerful points, some of which were also made by the previous speakers. You know, she started out, in fact, by echoing what we heard before, which is that education and services go hand in hand and are very important. She reminded us of a number of things. She brought up specifically the point about consent, which we heard very strongly from Denise in her presentation, and how important it is for children and young people to have the opportunity to learn about that at school, and particularly as it relates to sexual initiation and peer pressure related issues. I mean, really, she touched on so many things, as well as the role and the critical role of teachers and how they need to be trained and confident going forward. And then, of course, the critical issue around cases of violence and abuse and sexual violence and gender-based violence, and the importance for cities to have mechanisms in place for referral and support to the victims of that type of violence in particular is so very important. And also then, of course, reminding us, which is also critical in the Sustainable Development Goals in the United Nations, to leave no one behind. And I think that's a really powerful part of the conclusion that she left us with. Again, a terrific video. I think I'll be sharing that with lots of colleagues as well, because I think it had some very important messages included in that. So thank you very much to Marta Sulpici from Sao Paulo for sharing that with us today. we now have an opportunity for some questions and answers and some discussions with the panelists and amongst the panelists. So I'd like to invite those questions to come forward. We have colleagues from UIL to help us monitor the chat and to see what might be coming up as part of those questions. While we're waiting for those to come up, because of time constraints, I had asked Denise to hold some of the questions that she had prepared in her presentation. So Denise, would you like to maybe, while we're waiting for questions to emerge, jump in with some of the questions that you had wanted to share at the end of your presentation, please?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time, and thanks again for listening. And I think we can make change happen. And it was really refreshing to hear the consistent message coming across the different panelists. And the message is clear, is that we need to have conversations around health and especially consent, because it does affect everybody. So one of the questions that I had was the number of women affected by inappropriate sexual, I suppose, activity, and that was rape. And what was the statistic? And it's a frightening statistic. So does anyone in the audience want to answer that? Yeah. Is it 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 5? What do you think it might be? Okay, it's 1 and 3. So as a consolation prize, anyway, I'm going to hand it out to this person that's in front of me, Emer, if you don't mind handing it out to himself. Other questions that I might have had was that, you know, what might be the statistic in relation to the people that are satisfied? I asked a question at the beginning. When you think back on our own experience of sex education, whether it was in primary school, secondary school, or maybe it was our family, our guardians, our peers informed us, how prepared do you think people felt generally when we asked the question of our cohort of students, how prepared they felt they were after receiving the comprehensive sexual education? What do you think the yes answer might be? How prepared? Did you feel that you were properly prepared or adequately prepared to understand about consent and sex education to prepare you for life? Can I just ask what that might be? Has anyone, I'll get a show of hands here. If we were to ask you, do you feel that the sex education that you received through your formal education prepared you? Can we get a show of hands in the room? No. So there's 100% feel no. Well, the actual statistic there was 75% felt they weren't prepared. So that's why we need to have these conversations. That's why we're here today. And we're really positive about it. I think we can turn this around. I really feel that we can reduce the numbers in terms of consensual sex. We can really improve what we're doing. And there's a huge willingness. And I think once there's a willingness, we can make things happen. I might hand over to Emer. She may have other remarks just on the research that we have done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denise. I think a lot of points were covered there, and as Denise mentioned, it's really refreshing to see a consistent message coming through. My only remark for the moment, based on the research that I did, is that there's a huge need to develop CSE for the LGBTQ community. I know that that is certainly true in Ireland, but I can also see it in other countries as well. And for a huge emphasis to be placed on that is very important. I know that a member of our audience has a question, please, so I'm just going to drop the mic down.
Thank you very much, Ina. Hi, Chris and I hold. I just have a question. Since we are here in the global conference of learning cities, my question is about the role of the cities. You know, all the project we just talked about involved a lot of actors, some from the state, the one who are making the curriculum, the legal framework, the associations, for example, about people committed in the fight of the LGBTQ people, the healthcare services. So what I would like to know from all the experiences you shared with us is, what is the role of the cities in such a partnership? Is it being leaders? Is it being partners to initiatives? Is it being collaborators, hosts? What's the role, and how could we probably push forward and support cities in taking more initiatives in the field?
Great, thanks very much. I believe that question, you didn't identify yourself, but I believe that was from Didier Jourdain, who's a French colleague and actually also a UNESCO chair in school health. So thanks very much for that question. Asher, I think I see your hand is up, so why don't you jump in with a response, please?
Yeah, thank you so much. Really good question. And actually, it really does depend on the situation that you find yourself in. So one of the things I'm really proud about, led by our mayor, Marvin Rees, is that over the last 5 years, we've developed city governance. And it's not, we're not always just about, it's the council leading, it's the council's problem. All of the problems and the challenges that we face in our city are actually faced head on by all of our partners, including our citizens and residents. So one of the things that we try not to do, obviously where we have statutory responsibilities, we will of course take the lead, but we are very much into co-production and working with and not imposing on to residents and our partner agencies. So collaboration, partnership, co-production, you know, all of these words are used on an everyday basis in everything that we do. Where schools can lead the way, they can do. If it's the private sector, and I have to say the private sector in our city have been phenomenal in terms of the work and the money as well as the effort, voluntary effort that they also put behind many of the initiatives that we have developed in the city. The period friendly places, for example, you know, they put their money where their mouth is, and they helped us to purchase those products to enable those to be so what we do as a city is really lay down what the challenges are, and we say to individuals, what's your offer, what's your ask, what can you do to engage in that, and where it makes sense. Bristol, the city will lead, but the city leads and wants to bring everyone with us. So we're not trying to impose our will on the people. It has to be a consensus approach.
Thank you, Asher. We had a little bit of a problem with the sound just toward the end of what you were saying, but I think we caught most of what you said. So thanks very much for that. And I think your point about the co-production, the importance of partnership and collaboration, and your mention of involving the private sector did come through loud and clear. So thanks very much for sharing that. Zadi, I think I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, I think in the case, well, adolescents and young people will not be able to find the services, specific services they need if they don't know where they are, and if they don't know if the people who will attend them will actually provide what they're looking for. And mapping of services is a huge undertaking, and we certainly can collaborate with cities in a number of different ways. Cities sometimes have lists of their own of different types of services, which we can use to pre-identify where we have to go when we do the actual mapping. Cities can contribute to the mapping itself, either by providing volunteers to go through the streets and to actually collect the data. But also there is a role of coordination, which can be very important. We have seen that in Nigeria, different organizations are trying to do a similar undertaking, and it's really a pity that we are not working together to feed the same databases that every one of us can use. And if the city takes the lead in that undertaking, there is a greater chance that we will not be duplicating the work. So those are just only examples of contributions that cities could make. to help adolescents and young people to have not only the information, but also access to the services.
Thanks, Xavier. And that leads me to one thought I'd like to maybe move us towards in conclusion. I heard Marta, in particular, at the end of her presentation, mention for her the importance and the value of solidarity and international connections between cities. Asher, you mentioned the fast track cities as a connection between Bristol and other cities around the world, as a kind of inspiration and an opportunity to kind of connect with that particular initiative. Emma, you mentioned at the beginning, you made reference to the UN guidance as something that you referred to and talked about as an important reference internationally. I think those connections and what Xavier is talking about as well, it's about, and again, I want to thank the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning and Youngsu for this opportunity of this session, because I think it really underscores that not only does this provide us with a platform to share examples of good policy and practice with ourselves, but hopefully those conversations will continue beyond this particular session, that we'll continue to be inspired and learn from each other. I know that's something I've learned a lot in this session, and I feel very optimistic and inspired by all the wonderful things that all of you have shared. But I also think that the connections amongst ourselves and between cities is something really valuable and worthwhile. And I think that really underscores, in particular for me, a great value of the Learning Cities network itself. And again, grateful to have the opportunity today for us to be able to share and focus specifically around questions relating to sexual and reproductive health and rights, and how comprehensive sexuality education and sexual and reproductive services, sexual and reproductive health services are so very important as a part of what cities know they need to make sure are available. Asher, I love your point that it's not always just the council, but it's all the partners, it's everybody, all the different actors in the city that need to step up and take a responsibility for that. And Denise, your point earlier as well about how, sometimes the statistic that you shared about people feeling dissatisfied about the sexuality education that they may have experienced, we see the same from other global surveys and statistics as well. There's one from Asia Pacific recently that came out underscoring almost exactly the same statistic that you shared. But there is hope. We are seeing progress. UNESCO is about to release a new global status report on sexuality education around the world. And I can tell you that what we're seeing is that more and more countries and cities and schools, parents and communities and young people are reporting to us progress. We're not done yet. We can't tick this off the list as something that's been achieved. It's going to still require a lot of effort, but we are seeing more than ever countries acknowledging that young people do have sexual and reproductive health and rights. We need to make sure that they have access to good quality, comprehensive sexuality education with all the characteristics that Emma and Xavier reminded us of in their presentations, and Asher and Marta as well. Age appropriate, starting at an early age, building block, gender equality, gender respect, taking on a comprehensive view of the range of different topics that relate to sexuality, that relate to respectful relationships, that bring out the issues that Denise shared around consent in particular. Because at the end of the day, we want healthy, safe relationships between people in our cities around the world. That's what we're aiming for. We want young people to feel confident and safe and empowered in terms of their future. So just before we conclude, I might just invite each of the panelists to say one sentence about a key take-home message that you found from today's series of presentations. Again, I'm sorry Marta's not with us to be able to share her thoughts and wisdom, because I really loved her message in her video presentation. I'm going to go in reverse order, and I'm going to start with Xavier, then Asher, then Denise, and then Emma. So Xavier, your one sentence take-home message from today.
There's a world of opportunities to collaborate with cities for the sexual and reproductive health of adolescents and young people.
Great. So an optimistic view from you, Xavier. Thank you. Asher, would you like to share your big take-home observation from today's session?
Xavier took the words out of my mouth, really, but he's absolutely right. As cities, I learn the best from other cities. For me, it is about ways in which we can learn best practice, share best practice, and collaborate where we can. I know, for example, in Los Angeles, in America, they've taken our period-friendly places initiative and are establishing that in the United States. So we can learn from each other, and that's the great thing about Learning Cities. That's what we're here to do, learn from each other through this network.
Terrific. Thank you, Asher. Okay, then let's invite Denise to go next with her big take-home message from today's session.
Consent is everyone's business, and together we can achieve more.
Okay, thank you very much. Consent is everyone's business, and together we can achieve more. That's very concise. Thank you for that, Denise, and very important. And then Emma, last observation from the day's session. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Again, I just echo what everyone else said, that everyone is responsible and that we can learn from each other. And I really look forward to conversations that will continue after this session.
Terrific, thank you. I'd like to thank all of the speakers for the excellent presentations. Thank you for keeping to time, and thank you for focusing on the really important topic of our session. I again want to thank our host, Yansu, for allowing us to have this wonderful platform and opportunity to exchange and share ideas, and of course, UNESCO's Institute for Lifelong Learning for coordinating and pulling together the conference and supporting the Learning Cities network. Thank you very much, and with that, I'll conclude the session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all the speakers and the moderator for making such a great session. In this session, we discuss the theme of promoting learning for health in the field of sexuality. So this is the end of our program for today. I'd like to extend my gratitude to all the participants for joining us today, despite your busy schedule and amid this COVID-19 situation. We hope to see all of you in person soon. Wish you all good. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you. Goodbye.
Recording stopped.